Welcome to the Highland Heights Sunday morning Bible class. We are glad that you are joining our conversation. We have been going through a series on Christian apologetics, taking on some of the hardest questions that are posed towards Christians, maybe some questions that you've heard from non-believers, those who are questioning the Christian faith, and trying to bring together the best evidence that Christian thinkers have offered for 2,000 years now. We go a little long, but we will do our best to bring the best evidence forward. Today, whenever you're watching this video, we're recording this at night, we are going to look at the resurrection. Simply put, as many have said, starting with Paul and going forward in time to every Christian philosopher, Christian theologian, if the resurrection is not true, then Christianity falls apart. We'll consider that thought more as we go along, but we're going to look to build up the case. We've been going through the book, The Case for Faith, by Lee Strobel. And this is one of the central arguments for faith. So, Jeremy, I'm sure you have some opening comments to get us motivated here, but I guess this will lead us into the question: did he die?
Well, and that's where we have to start, because if he didn't die, then it's not a resurrection. People suffer wounds; they are hurt and they recover all the time. So. And skeptics say sometimes that Jesus didn't die. It's called sometimes it's called the swoon theory, that Jesus on the cross he passed out, and that those foolish first century people didn't know what dead really was, and so they pulled him off the cross prematurely and they put him in a tomb, and it was cool and it was dry and he revived and he got up and he felt better, and so he came out of the tomb and everybody thought, oh my goodness, he died and he came back from the dead. Okay. Now, there are some problems with this explanation, most of which center around the idea of the word excruciating. Okay. The word excruciating literally comes from crucifixion. And you think about what excruciating is. It's awful pain. Okay. So what happened on the cross? And fair warning, I wouldn't recommend watching this part while you're eating. Okay. Jesus on the cross, crucifixions, first thing in the first century, were not all that rare. However, if you were a Roman citizen, you were not allowed to be crucified because it was such a horrible, painful death. Okay. That's why, according to church tradition, Paul was beheaded and Peter was crucified, because Paul was a Roman citizen, Peter wasn't. Okay. So it was so humiliating, so painful, that they said, we're not going to subject Roman citizens to this. Okay. Think about what Jesus had gone through. He had been awake for 24 hours. He's exhausted. He has gone through a very traumatic, very emotional experience in the Garden of Gethsemane. Okay. They have flogged him. Okay. And flogging here, this is not like when you get in trouble as a kid and you get a quick swat from your parent's hand or something. Flogging was incredibly brutal. It was incredibly painful. The Romans did not have the 40 lash rule. They could pretty much, beat you until they got tired. It happens relatively often in the ancient world that victims of crucifixion never got there because they died during the flogging. By the time they're done with the flogging, Jesus' back has been torn to ribbons and he has already lost a significant amount of blood, and he's not even on the cross yet. Okay. Then they take him to the cross and they would have driven big old nails. Okay. These are not, the little 10-penny nails that you would hang a picture with. Okay. And they would have driven one through each wrist right here. Okay. And then one through the ankles. And they would have hung you on the cross so that you were hanging down, which means to breathe, you have to pull up and push up on that nail. Okay. Scraping your back against the cross, and the cross would not have been smooth wood. Okay. It would have been very rough. That's what crucifixion was like. Okay. So going through all of this, when you consider the stress, the pain that Jesus went through, he has lost buckets and buckets and buckets of blood. The idea that he just swoons, it is possible that the pain would cause him to pass out, but the idea that he swoons and then is revived beggars belief. And while we're considering this topic, let's consider he was being crucified by Roman soldiers, experts in the art of death. They may not have known all the anatomy in the world, but they knew when somebody was dead. And oh, by the way, when he dies, and he died relatively quickly, that's not in dispute. Pilate is surprised by how quickly Jesus dies. It was not uncommon in the ancient Roman world for people to hang on the crosses for days. That's actually why they went to break the legs of the two revolutionaries, the two murderers that were crucified with Jesus, because they wanted to get them dead and down off the cross before the holy day began in Jerusalem. They didn't want to stir up any trouble. Okay. So to check that Jesus was dead, just to make sure, they take a spear and they thrust it through his side, and it describes that blood and water come out. Okay. What's going on there is the cardiac sac around the heart would have filled with fluid, and that fluid would have been clear. So that's what it means by blood and water, is that clear fluid that surrounds that would have filled the cardiac sac, and then the blood. So if he wasn't already dead, they stabbed him in the heart. Okay. So he's dead. And even if you grant that he might not have been, that he might have passed out, the idea that he would have laid in a tomb for 3 days with no food, no water, nothing, been revived, gotten up, gotten out of the tomb, gotten past the soldiers, and gotten to his apostles and been able to convince them that he was the Lord of creation. You know, the Jesus that comes out of the tomb, he is not depicted as someone who has suffered this horrible, horrible beating. He's not depicted as someone recovering. He is depicted as the Lord of life. So none of the evidence matches any other theory, but he was dead when they put him in the tomb.
Right. In fact, it's easier for a skeptic it's easier for them to say that he was never on the cross at all than to say that he died. To say that the entire event is made up, but those who would lead you to believe that he never died after going through the cross are unaware of what happened, of what being on the cross looks like. A few thoughts here. You mentioned that no Roman citizen would be crucified because it was a heinous act, and you wouldn't put someone through the humiliation there. Similarly, in Jewish culture, Paul quotes in Galatians 3, he quotes Deuteronomy, where it says, "Cursed is any man who hangs on a tree." It was well known amongst the Jewish people just how awful this type of punishment was. And Jeremy, you brought up that the Romans were expert killers. That's completely true. However, everyone else there also was very well aware of what death is. I think C.S. Lewis is given credit for saying the phrase chronological snobbery, that because we are the most advanced people in history, we look down on anyone who came before us. You know what? Maybe that's true in terms of techs and gadgets, but when it comes to death, I have never seen a person die. In our society, when someone is near death, we get them out. We move them away. We put them in hospitals. We have all sorts of ways to remove death from our everyday life. For a first century Jew, they had likely seen people die. Family was close by when the time of death came. So it's not just these trained killers that know what a dead person looks like. It's all of first century Jews, Gentiles. Everyone knows what death is a whole lot better than we know what death is. So the idea that they were somehow uneducated on what it looked like for someone to die is fairly absurd. So, if you believe, as not Christian and non-Christian historical accounts tell us, that Jesus was on the cross, that he died, where do we go from there? Next, he has to be taken to the tomb. So, Jeremy, what do we know about the situation, the circumstances of the burial of Jesus?
Well, we know that he was buried in a new tomb owned by a member of the council. And there's some important points here, corroborating evidence that when you put it all together, the best explanation, and we need to understand, we are looking at what is the best explanation for all of the facts. Okay. Mm-hmm. When you're talking about a resurrection, that's an extraordinary claim. Extraordinary claim requires extraordinary evidence. However, once you have eliminated the impossible, whatever remains, however improbable, must be true. So, one, if you want a believable story, you would not pick a member of the Sanhedrin as the guy that buried him, because you can check that.
Right.
Okay. Two, one thing we never see is we never see them go get the body. Now, as Christians, we would say, yeah, it's because there was nothing to get. And that's the best explanation for the evidence. But here's the thing. Within 40 days in Jerusalem, the apostles are proclaiming this Christian faith, with the center, the core of its doctrine being Jesus was raised from the dead, bodily, physically. You want to kill Christianity, you want to strangle it in its cradle, all you got to do is on Pentecost, go get the body of Jesus, lay it at Peter's feet and says, this is the body of Jesus. And Peter says, yep, we're wrong. And it dies. Never do that. They never do that. So some people say that they went to the wrong tomb. Okay. Or that they moved the body. One of the theories is that Mary, when she meets Jesus in the garden and he says, Mary, and she turns around and says, Rabboni, and things like that. One of the theories is that was actually the gardener who was saying that he is not here. Okay. Or that the angels were actually gardeners that were mistaken by the witnesses. And when they said he's not here, they meant he moved the body. Okay. If that's true, why didn't somebody correct the error? See, multiple people went to the tomb that morning. Okay. The women went to the tomb. And by the way, it specifically says they watched them bury Jesus. So they knew where they were going. And then Peter and John went to the tomb later. Okay. So if they went to the wrong tomb, why didn't somebody correct the error? Okay. So it's not a likely lie based on who they pick, or based on who they say buried him, Joseph of Arimathea and Nicodemus. Okay. It's not likely a lie because no one ever corrects it. It's a very simple thing to correct, is to say, no, this is the tomb. Here is the body. It was a new tomb. There only would have been one body in the tomb if it's a new tomb. So this is the body. Okay. That's all they had to do. No one ever does that. Okay. Third piece of evidence is the key first witnesses of the resurrection were women. In the first century culture, if you're making up a story, those aren't the people you pick. Okay, we talked last week about how women were not trusted as witnesses in the first century world. Okay, and yet that's who is the first witnesses, which rings of truth. And the final piece of evidence is,
Jeremy, before you move on to that final piece, let me say something there. So N.T. Wright, I will put up. So when we say the word tome, this is a tome. This is a ridiculously long book. N.T. Wright, in his book The Resurrection of Jesus Christ, talks about how yes, the women would not usually be used, and so likely there was pressure on these first century writers to not use that in their description of what happened. To the obviously the Holy Spirit is driving what they say, but there was likely outside pressure from those saying, why use this evidence? So Wright makes the claim, and I think that this makes sense, that if they're going to use the testimony of these women in this first century context, then the evidence must have been overwhelming that you can't take this out. You can't remove the testimony of these women, because it is just that credible. There must have been, there must have been some agreement amongst the community that these women know what they're talking about. Anyway, sorry to interrupt.
Absolutely. That's exactly what we're saying. Is that it rings true because of the evidence that we have. The final piece of evidence that there was an empty tomb, okay, is there's a Sherlock Holmes story where Holmes discovers the culprit because the dog doesn't bark. And the idea is it's the one who owns the dog who did it. If it had been anybody else, the dog would have barked. So it's what's missing. Okay. And you have to be careful with evidence that's missing. But this is a case where the dog that doesn't bark carries a lot of weight. Because again, if you want to strangle Christianity in its cradle, all you have to do is go find the body. And yet every single piece of evidence, both from Christians and from those who had a vested interest in it not being true, agrees that the tomb was empty. Think about Matthew 28. What do the Jewish leaders tell the guards? They give them money and they say, tell people his apostles came and stole the body. That presupposes that the tomb was empty. Mm-hmm. So it's the dog that doesn't bark. Where is the body? Okay. If you're going to have a resurrection as it's described in the New Testament, first you got to have a death. Second, you've got to have the body be missing. And every single piece of evidence point to the body was missing. The question then becomes, what is the explanation for why was the body missing?
Yeah. So the next thing we're going to get into is, was the body stolen? And so in Matthew 28, where the Pharisees are talking with the guards, perhaps if you're a skeptic, you bring up that verse and you say, well, that's exactly what someone would write in the Christian, this is the Christian interpretation of events, or first century followers' interpretation. And so they're saying falsely that the Pharisees told the guards to do this, when in fact that's actually what happened. Why do we think that, Jeremy, kind of run us through the different potential culprits? Who are the suspects for who could have stolen the body? What were their motives? Why do we think they didn't do it?
Well, there's really three main suspects: Jesus' followers, the Jewish leaders, and the Romans. And we'll go through them in reverse order of likelihood. First, the Romans. I mean, look, if you're going to commit a crime, the first thing they want to know is motive. Why on earth would the Romans care?
Yeah, they don't even care. That
makes no sense. But there have been people that suggest, well, it was the Romans. Well, that's ludicrous. Okay, there's no reason. Okay. Second is the Jewish leaders. Once again, why would they do that? Like, what's motivating them? And if they did, once again, 40 days later, in the city where it happened, in front of the people that condemned him to death, the apostles are saying, Jesus was raised from the dead. We saw it with our own eyes. We touched him with our own hands. And if they stole the body, why didn't they go get it and bring it and say, here it is. Here's the body. You're lying. Okay. So that's fairly unlikely. The third culprit is potentially the apostles. Again, why would they do that? Why would they make up this story? And a skeptic might say, well, because they love Jesus, they didn't want it to end, all of these things. Okay, fine. Except they never truly grasped while Jesus was on this earth, when Jesus said, I'm going to be raised from the dead. They never accepted that. They never grasped what that meant. Okay. They were still confused and thinking he was dead and gone even after he was raised from the dead. Poor Thomas, he misses church one day and he gets the nickname Doubting Thomas for the rest of time. Poor guy. Okay. He didn't believe it. They did not expect this. This shocked and stunned them, which makes sense. I mean, in our experience, dead people stay that way. Okay. And we're not talking about all resurrection claims. We're talking about this specific resurrection claim and what makes it unique. So they didn't expect it. They had no reason to go steal the body, and they died for this. And unless someone say, oh, well, yeah, they died for it, but they died for it when they were old. No, the Apostle James was killed in Acts chapter 12. And they were beaten by the Sanhedrin very early on in their ministry. Okay. So they are suffering physical pain and they are being threatened with death. And if they stole the body, they're going through all this for something they know is not true. And these are not men who are presented in the Gospels as being real courageous men. In the Gospels, they're cowards. Let's be honest. So we're supposed to believe that these men willingly died in poverty for a lie, something they knew to be false. It just does not fit what we know of human nature and of how people behave. So there's not really any good reason to believe that any of these three groups would have stolen the body.
Just to add on, to the fact that they died, Tim Keller quotes Blaise Pascal, and I'll read it. Pascal says about the witnesses, I believe those witnesses that get their throats cut. There is credibility to someone dying. Once again, what a skeptic might say is that's a power move. I think that's extremely, what's the word I'm looking for? You are giving it the worst possible light that it could have. Those people who die usually don't die for a lie. Jeremy, you mentioned they died early, they died late. This was not a one-time thing. So there's a difference here. I might be jumping ahead a little bit here, but just to also put forward the idea that this, as you said with Thomas was not expecting this. Nobody was expecting this. His followers were coming out of a Jewish tradition that certainly did not believe in this resurrection. Some skeptics have brought forward the argument, they were being informed by other religions of their time, and there's no evidence that is the case. That these country bumpkins, uneducated men that they were, had the information from other religions. But even if they did, other religions of the time that had these resurrection myths did not have resurrection myths of normal people. They had resurrection myths of gods. So in the Christian teaching that God became man, that's going against any other teaching that might have potentially informed them. And most likely it didn't. So this is a person rising from the dead. No one in the first century, or for that matter, no one in any century, believes that is first normal. And most people don't believe that it could happen at all. So there is definitely something that is different from any other background. And you mentioned this earlier, and this seems to be important for a lot of people who study this, that we know that they believed it to be true because it changed everything about their theology. It wasn't just that this one event happened and they used it as a claim to preach something new. It changed everything that they believed. It changed everything about the way that they viewed the world going forward. Philippians chapter 2, and what we believe to be one of the earliest writings of the New Testament church is reflecting on this. And so we see it early, we see it late in Christian theology as it's developed. So yes, so this is something that is deeply ingrained for these people. All right, let's or do we want to continue to talk about witnesses, the different people that saw him afterwards? So he died, he was buried, He was raised from the dead. No one stole the body.
Right.
And because he's raised from the dead, so we've talked about Thomas, there are other people that were capable of seeing him at this point.
Exactly. Again, we're making an extraordinary claim. There should be extraordinary evidence to back it up. There are, let's be honest, there are more logical explanations, or there are other conceivable explanations for the chain of events we've talked about so far than a resurrection. Okay. An unknown person stole the body or something like that. We don't quite logically jump to the conclusion, oh, there's been a resurrection even if we were to find an empty grave or something.
Yeah. In a weekend broadcast drama, if someone digs up a tomb and the tomb is empty, everyone doesn't just assume, oh, the person was raised from the dead. There's foul play. We would need some other evidence to show us, not only the dead person, but the living person.
Exactly. We would need someone who saw the dead person not dead after they were dead.
Yeah.
Okay, to paraphrase an episode of MASH. All right. So, witnesses. We need credible people who saw Jesus alive after he was dead. And one of the earliest statements, and we mentioned last week, we believe that this goes back to within just a few years, maybe even just a few months of the events, is 1 Corinthians 15. This sounds like a statement of belief, and Paul presents it as something. He says in 1 Corinthians 15:3, "For I delivered to you as of first importance what I also received, that Christ died for our sins in accordance with the scripture, that he was buried, that he was raised on the third day in accordance with the scriptures," and now our action part, "that he appeared to Cephas, then to the 12, then he appeared to more than 500 brothers at one time, most of whom are still alive, though some have fallen asleep. Then he appeared to James, then to all the apostles. Last of all, as to one untimely born, he appeared also to me." So that is a list of witnesses. Okay, and let's unpack some of what's going on here. Okay, you have multiple people. You have multiple people at the same time seeing the same thing. You have 500 people, which is interesting. This is the only account we have of that. I want more details of that. Okay, I'll ask one day. Okay, I want to meet those 500 people. And by the way, there's this statement, most of whom are still alive, though some have fallen asleep. That sounds like Paul threw something in there. And it sounds like he threw that in to say, hey, they're still around. You can go ask them. I'll give you their names. Okay. So you've got Cephas, you've got the apostles, you've got more than 500 brothers. Okay. You've got James. James, probably James, the brother of Jesus, did not believe in Jesus while he was alive. And you have
first time.
Paul. Yeah, the first time. Yeah, exactly. And you have Paul, who very much did not believe. So you not only have to account for the fact that the apostles, they didn't expect Jesus to be raised from the dead. You also have to deal with the fact that a whole bunch of people saw him. Okay. And some people will say, oh, well, they were hallucinations. Here's the problem with that. That's not how hallucinations work. 500 people don't hallucinate the same thing at the same time. Okay. It doesn't matter what the cause of the hallucination is. Some have suggested they might have been hypnotized. Again, that's not how hypnosis works. No. Okay. And you've also, and even if, okay, you want to go down that road, you've got to explain why a skeptic like James and an out and out enemy of the gospel, how big an enemy? He was the one in charge of the party that stoned Stephen. And he led a persecution and he was chasing Christians to Damascus. Okay. You have to explain what happened to Saul of Tarsus to make him into Paul. Okay. These are some pretty significant witnesses. And again, the best explanation for this evidence is they saw what they claimed. Again, many of these people died for what they said. Okay. Many of them were persecuted for what they said. And what's more, and this is very, very interesting and a very, very interesting tidbit. I wouldn't say it was dispositive on its own, but when you add it to the rest of the evidence, it's fairly intriguing. You have a group of Jews and very faithful Jews. You're talking earlier about borrowing from other religions, okay? There were Jews that borrowed from other religions. These Jews don't fit that profile. Okay, they're apparently very serious about their faith and what they believe and what they practice. Okay, worship on the Sabbath was a big deal to the Jews. The church worships on the first day of the week. Why? That was the day Jesus was raised from the dead. Okay. And again, that's not dispositive in and of itself, but when you add that to the rest of the evidence, you have to explain the change in life, the change of behavior. Why did these people do what they did? What is the best explanation for the evidence? And when you bring all of this together, once you have eliminated the impossible, whatever remains, however improbable, must be true. The best explanation for the facts is Jesus got out of the grave.
We are just a minute over 30 minutes. So, and we've hit all of the major points. So, Jeremy, if you're talking to a skeptic, you've brought them through each of the points. Perhaps they end with a why. So for kind of our closing statements here, what's the why here? Why do we care about this? Why is this so important for the Christian faith?
Well, Paul, when the verse we just read out of 1 Corinthians 15, Paul is defending the resurrection. And he makes a very powerful statement at the end of 1 Corinthians 15. He says, "O death, where is your victory? O death, where is your sting?" The final enemy is death. The ultimate punishment for sin is death, eternal death. Jesus breaks the chains. Jesus breaks the bonds of sin and death and frees us. Yes, we will have to pass through death unless we're here when Jesus comes again. But that's not the end of our story. See, ultimately, the resurrection is victory. And it's a promise that goes all the way back to when we first broke everything. In Genesis 3, God promises the woman, he promises Eve, you will have a descendant. The serpent will bruise his heel. He will crush the serpent's head. And that's what's happening here. This is victory, and that's why we care. That's why this is so important. Because it tells us we will eventually triumph through Christ.
Yeah, that's well said. I want to end off with two quotes, and we'll give Tim Keller and N.T. Wright the last word here. First, Keller on a reaction that might happen after being presented with this evidence, and then N.T. Wright on how Christianity is changed by the resurrection. So first Keller. I sympathize with the person who says, so what if I can't think, so what if I can't think of an alternate explanation? The resurrection just couldn't happen. However, let's not forget that the first century people felt exactly the same way. They found the resurrection just as inconceivable as you do. The only way anyone embraced the resurrection back then was by letting the evidence challenge and change their worldview, their view of what was possible. They had just as much trouble with the claims of the resurrection as you, yet the evidence, both of the eyewitness accounts and the changed lives of Christian followers, was overwhelming. Hopefully, Jeremy, I think you've done a good job of laying out that overwhelming evidence. So for the changed lives of Christians, here's N.T. Wright on how he says this changes everything for us as Christians. The message of the resurrection is that this world matters, that the injustices and pains of this present world must now be addressed with the news that healing, justice, and love have won. If Easter means Jesus Christ is only raised in a spiritual sense, then it is only about me and finding a new dimension in my personal spiritual life. But if Jesus Christ is truly risen from the dead, Christianity becomes good news for the whole world, news which warms our hearts precisely because it isn't just about warming hearts. Easter means that in a world where injustice, violence, and degradation are endemic, God is not prepared to tolerate such things, and that we will work and plan with all the energy of God to implement victory of Jesus over them all. Take away Easter, and Karl Marx was probably right to accuse Christianity of ignoring problems of the material world. Take it away, and Freud was probably right to say Christianity is wish fulfillment. Take it away, and Nietzsche probably was right to say it was for wimps. Without the resurrection, perhaps the skeptics are right, but we have evidence, we have knowledge that these claims are true. And for 2,000 years, Christians have gloried in God because of the good things that he has done. Jeremy, are we continuing on with the Apologetics series, or do we have one more week? Okay. As Jeremy, you said before we started recording, this is it. Like this is the one. This is the one that we really have to have nailed down. So hopefully this has been rewarding for all who have participated here. And we look forward to continuing the conversation next week.